Hey, Frederick.
Good morning. How's it going?
It's going all right. How you doing?
Oh, I'm pretty okay.
Let me just.
Friday evening, so can't complain. Only
Oh,
two
right,
hour,
right,
two
right.
hours more of meetings, and then I'm off.
Feel free to put your tenants in there.
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
It's going all right. How you doing, Jay?
Hanging in there, just sitting here finishing up on the treadmill. These days, early morning means cutting to my prime gym time.
We'll give it a few more minutes for some folks to join. I know it's been quite busy, and also I know that there's been some shakeups at a lot of the companies over the past few days. So I know that a lot of folks are, even if not impacted, directly impacted in some way. So give it a few more minutes. Yeah, there's the doc. Feel free to reach out to the OpenSSF if I'm sometimes struggle to kind of get a response, but yeah. All right, give me 1 second here. Okay, we could probably get started and see as folks hop on. So the agenda for today actually was mostly going to try and see if we can get some folks. Also, actually, as just as a reminder, meetings being recorded will be uploaded to YouTube shortly thereafter. And also your participation in this meeting is an agreement to abide by the OpenSSF Code of Conduct. And so just as a reminder, like, the only major thing on the agenda was we're looking for contributors for getting tools ready for 1.0 spec and requirements. So for the most part, I believe 1.0, based on the changes we've seen in the spec, it's a little bit of minutia, but it's not really any sort of material change between 0.2 requirements and 1.0. It's mostly just clarifications, like we're calling non-falsifiability, non-forgeability, as opposed to non-falsifiability. And some like clarifications of that sort. The bigger changes have been in the specification. So the specification, we've been trying to include temporal metadata and metadata that we expect to change build to build, even if you have a reproducible build. We expect that metadata to be in its own separate section so that folks can go in, like tools would be, it would make it much easier for tools to just say, take the hash of this section of the you know, these keys and values of in the provenance document, and then, you know, so that we can pretty much, you know, very easily see that, you know, different sections of the document, whether or not they're the same, and that should be the stuff that is, you know, quote unquote reproducible, right? So like if it has all the same hash inputs, all the various same hash outputs, and, you know, the same sort of inputs for the build and whatnot, then if the output, you know, even if the output has timestamps, those timestamps are in another location on the document, that could easily just sort of be on the side, and then that would help out with being able to say, hey, are these two things identical? Because I think right now what a lot of folks are doing is they're sort of going through key value by key value and checking if each of those things is equal, and that's causing some, you know, not issues, but it's not as easy as just sort of saying, hey, here's all the stuff that should be reproducible, and then I can, you know, if I see that the hashes aren't the same, now let me go key value by key value to see what's changed. So that's one of the big things. I was hoping to get some of the folks who've been working on the GitHub generator stuff to maybe stop by. I know that even, you know, I know a lot of those folks are from Google. I know there's been some stuff this morning for those of us here in the East Coast, at least. I know there's been some shakeups there, so hopefully nobody's impacted. But anyway, looking to kind of work with some of them on getting something like a 1.0 spec ready, and that's supposed to be in preparation for 1.0, which once again, most likely sometime in Feb, it'll be in a draft form, and then it'll probably be a month or two of getting back feedback, and then, you know, figure probably before the summer, I assume, you know, the full-fledged 1.0 will be released. So that's that. The other thing is
Mike, can I just add something to that? So you did mention the SLSA builder from Google, but even from NPM, we are targeting the 1.0 spec for the built-in provenance generation in the CLI.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Actually, that was something I was gonna bring up in a little bit. I know Wietze is not on this call, but and I don't want to share his design document without his approval, but he's been working on some NPM SLSA policy tooling. And there were some interesting things there that I actually hadn't realized, which is less than 1% of the top 1,000 packages of NPM include package lock files, which I was like, oh, okay, that's a little scary. And I think the idea was potentially using SLSA provenance as something akin to a not a lock file, but something that you could at least know, like, oh, I pulled in something. Oh no, a newer version came out. That doesn't have the SLSA provenance. It must not be, you know, whatever. There's some stuff there that seemed really interesting. Cool, yeah. So if there are things on that end that you would need some support from the other folks on the SLSA side, I know myself, I'm interested in helping out any way I can. I know some other tools that are out there like Tecton and Tecton Chains. They have a little bit of a longer release cadence. So we might try to say, hey, we're going to wait until after 1.0 is like fully adopted before trying to get Tecton and Tecton Chains to accept that. Trishunk?
Yeah, hi. So I just wanted to clarify how exactly are the specific issues or PRs that we can help with?
So I think the thing was whoops, I have been talking on mute. Sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So yeah. So the idea here behind it was there's a bunch of different stuff, for example, under the SLSA framework, under a bunch of these other different repos, projects and whatnot, whether it's like the SLSA GitHub generator or whether it is what else? There's the SLSA GitHub generator. There is the there's a SLSA verifier. There's a Jenkins one. There's stuff that's coming from other groups like NPM. There is stuff like Fresca and Tecton, and these all support or they all support SLSA today, and some of them we want to see, can we prep them for SLSA 1.0? Because I think one of the first things that's going to happen is once we start to say there's a draft, people are going to start to immediately start asking like questions about how do I implement it, and or what tools support this, so I know how, if I can prep myself and yada yada. And I think that sort of thing is going to be useful to just have, the two main goals are, one is obviously to have some of the tools ready to start supporting this, and then to help us also start testing some of this out, right? So some of this is going to be, hey, how can I provide feedback if no tool supports the draft? It's kind of that sort of thing. And then secondarily, it's also to show some examples of, hey, here's how you might implement this. Here's how you might, do all this sort of stuff. So that's really kind of where we're coming from there. So I don't know if there's folks who have been working on on any of these tools. And in fact, actually, it's probably worthwhile to put in the notes here. Let's see. Oh, okay. So very cool. Somebody's been already adding. Thanks, whoever's been adding in there. So is the NPM thing, is that just the NPM CLI?
Sorry, could you repeat?
So is the getting NPM to support this thing, is that just the NPM CLI?
Yes, and of course any backend store of the attestations, because we would sort of need to verify it's part of them as well to make sure, like, the cryptographic material holds up, etc. But primarily, I would say on the CLI, some on the server side.
Okay, that's actually something that would be a good topic also. That's some folks, but I'll wait till after for attestation distribution, because there's been some discussion about that as well. So do you have is there like a GitHub issue or an existing PR that maybe we can just point folks to if they're just sort of interested in understand, like whether they want to obviously help participate here, or just at least keep track of, like, hey, what's the status of NPM's implementation of this thing?
Not that I'm aware of in my head. There probably are. I can go and see if I find someone, and then I will add them.
Sure. Yeah, just want to make sure that as we kind of do this, I was going to probably, after this this meeting, actually, in fact, let me do that right now. I'm going to create a GitHub issue under SLSA framework. Tracking issue for SLSA 1.0 support. Just, are supporting. Give me 1 second, just write up the ticket. All right. Okay. 1 second. Let me just. Where did I just put this document here? All right, I just created that ticket. So okay. So that was that. Okay. So from the, I will say from obviously from the Fresca and Tecton side, Fresca relies on Tecton today. We are pretty much ready to support the 1.0 requirements, I believe, from the Fresca side. Once again, Tecton, it's because of Tecton chains, so it's kind of a combination of things. So like Tecton itself doesn't necessarily hit the requirements, but a configuration of Tecton with the right integration of tools does support the right stuff. The other thing here is, but with that said, I believe Tecton Chains, just given that it has its release cadence is significantly longer than the GitHub generators, which are just, hey, I made an update, so we just made another release. That sort of thing might be a little bit easier. But yeah, if folks are aware of anything, feel free to point folks in the direction of that ticket, because that should also hopefully help folks out as well. Okay. And then does anybody else have anything else from the tool side that they wanted to chat through? Otherwise, we can talk a little bit about the attestation sort of discovery and distribution. Okay, so I know we had talked about this previously, and I know Mark has been talking about it as well. So one of the things that we're looking to do is a lot of folks have been asking, and Frederick, you might actually be able to help out here regarding like distributing the actual attestations, especially for different package ecosystems or different build systems and so on. And a lot of folks have a lot of different opinions. Obviously, folks can sort of implement it as they see fit, and different tools will support different things. But I think there's been enough folks who are just like, hey, it would be great though if, let's just say, like as an example, if NPM and Python and Ruby all sort of do it similarly, so that the tools that, let's say, would then pull down attestations could pull it down in similar ways. Similar to how, like with containers, more or less, folks are either following the existing sort of SigStore convention, or as time goes on, they're planning to follow the new OCI spec the stuff, which there's the distribution spec and there's some other stuff in there, prefers API, something like that. Anyway, those things that will help out with distribution as well. And so I think I don't know if there's anybody working on it, trying to get a hold of some folks who I know had chatted about this and seemed interested. And actually, that's something else that I will check to see if there's an existing issue for. Let's just see.
So on that, I'm actually looking at the current SLSA sort of 1.0 spec, and if I'm not wrong here, I think there is like a section in the spec that says like each ecosystem should define how to discover and download attestations. That does not, of course, mean that we shouldn't try to do it at different as we can in each ecosystem, but I think that's like a new addition to SLSA 1.0.
Yes. So yeah, that was something that Mark had added, and then one of the things that was brought up, at least in one of the meetings, was, and maybe like we as a group can not necessarily, like, we don't want to dictate how folks implement it, but we might want to provide at least a list of suggestions around, just to say like, hey, if everybody, let's say, just as an example, uses this sort of REST API with these sorts of endpoints, great. As long as you sort of do that, then your existing tools will just be able to automatically integrate with it. Yeah, I think. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, it's totally cool. So the only thing I can say is I probably don't have this exactly in my head, and I can find it, but for NPM, we will probably, if I remember correctly, we would have like a REST endpoint that's called attestation, and you would call it with package name and package version, I think, and then you would get like a list of all the attestations stored for that package, and optionally with a filter mechanism, so you can filter for specific predicates. That's the rough idea.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, and that's sort of how it's designed and implemented. But yeah, I'm gonna see if I can find any specs on that, because I know there are.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I like that approach. I know some folks have been talking about, hey, does it make sense to include the attestation in the tarball or whatever? And of course, that leads to other sorts of issues of like, does that mean I have to actually download the package to then open it up and then find out that actually, wait a second, or some way of attaching it to like the tarball or whatever? Because then you end up with this situation of like, oh, I have a tarball with the attestation, but then how do I compare that with the hash of what the outputs are? And there's a lot of different like things there, but I know that from an API standpoint, I know some folks have been saying like, hey, I would love to be able to pull down both at the same time or whatever. Like there's stuff there, but I think I like the simple approach, because then the tool can just sort of say, yeah, I can download both at the same time or whatever.
Yeah, one can just add some sort of background. I think the document for NPM is already pretty large, and that's sort of one approach. We decided to have it separately, and especially like initially, we kind of guessed that there will be maybe not slow adoption per se, but we do think like initially a lot of the packages won't have any attestations, and because the tarball or the document is not signed, it's kind of, let's say, a compromised mirror or something. You can just start to remove attestations, and then you wouldn't know. So that's why we kind of opted for this more online approach to see like, okay, is there anything for this?
Cool. Yeah. And I know, you know, some folks are starting to ask like the similar sort of questions with, and this also simplifies it, like, hey, I have you know, I'm using Artifactory or Soda type Nexus or whatever, and I want to know if there's attestations associated with this. And just having something like a simple API that is like, hey, I'm about to download this package. Can I just query to see if there is if there are attestations associated with it? Be useful. And once again, this is also something similar that we're doing with Guac as well already.
There is another reason. So I'm not saying this is like a real scenario, but more like a hypothetical thing. Like, let's say scans or something else were being made against a specific package, like those will be probably periodically executed, and so attestations will appear way after and a package has been sort of stored and the document is done. So like some kind of attestations is more like of a temporal thing, so you can't really pack them with a package.
Agreed. And that's also another thing people have been asking about, which is just like, hey, sometimes you have a build attestation, but you also have additional attestations that come afterwards because of stuff like security scans or whatever. That's really useful there. And so yeah, so there is an existing issue here. So there was this issue that was opened around this time last year. And I will add this to the but I'm going to add a comment here. All right. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'd be interested in okay, cool. Let's see if there's anything. Yeah, so I guess if I'd be interested if there's anything on that front, and also if there's anything like once again, I don't know if I mean, I assume it's going to be open sourced or like the API for it is for the distribution will be open sourced, because I think, you know, I know there is some back and forth about whether or not SLSA framework like OpenSSF wants to take this on as like, should we own some sort of like reference implementation of like what a distribution API could be, and just sort of say, hey, if folks want to use this distribution API, right? Like just and this could be like a generic, just sort of like, it's a generic REST API that just sort of takes in, let's say just something like it could take in a hash and or a name of an artifact, some provenance things, similar to pretty much what you just sort of said with the NPM stuff. Like, does it make sense for that? Obviously, if some, if a different group has something like that already, we could just point to it like NPM. But if the idea here is like, hey, actually the way it's sort of defined is maybe a bit specific to NPM, then we might want to just sort of say, great, like we can follow those sorts of things that you folks are doing and then implement something ourselves as well.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. I don't think we have any public document on this yet. I'm going over the RFC to see how well it was, or if it even was specified in there. No, I don't think we have the API in the RFC. So yeah, I have to punt on that, but it should definitely be a public document describing that.
Cool. Yeah. Because I think from our end, obviously, the less work that because we would love to be able to not obviously steal the work, but say, hey, the NPM folks have built this thing. We would love to maybe make that a demonstrative example, or maybe even provide a couple of suggestions to turn it into something that could make it completely generic or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, and then also, I don't know if you've talked to, like, separately, have you talked to Pizza lately?
He reached out to me yesterday and shared the document, which I think was the one you described.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet, to be honest, but I'm aware of it. So I will go over it next week.
Yeah. So yeah, I read it. It's quite in depth. He goes quite in depth there. I think the thing that I found funny was I was like, hey, why can't we just use package lock files? And I like read a little bit further along, and it's like, oh, it's because nobody is actually using package lock files. And I also know that not going to get into too many details, but there are some folks who seem to be pushing back against recommending the use of package lock.json for some reason. But I do think that sort of thing would be really useful, because I know, like, as somebody who used to, in a previous life, like 6-7 years ago, did a lot with Node.js, the amount of times running into issues because someone does an NPM on their local dev machine, it's different than what runs in build, and then further different than what actually gets deployed into production, is just like wild. And I think that sort of thing would be useful. And I know right now it seems like Vitsa's proposal is interesting, because it's like, could you use SLSA policy to sort of essentially say, actually, when I pull down packages, pull down the latest one with a SLSA thing that matches this policy. There's some stuff there that seemed interesting. But I know, previously, one of the things that I had done to secure NPM builds in a similar way to some of this stuff was, regardless of whatever I was doing, like if I was building an NPM pack, like an internal NPM tool package, yada yada, is even if the upstream things didn't have package-lock.json, is I would download it and then generate my own package-lock as part of the build. And then, so when it gets actually deployed into production or whatever, it's like, sorry, you don't just pull in whatever the latest changes there. And even if that latest change is a security fix, like, that should go through the build process, because what happens if it's not a security fix and it's, anyway.
Yeah, like, I don't know, abuse on semantic versioning. I think we've seen that before, and we are going to continue to see it in the future. Like, who knows if it's actually a patch unless you have, scrutinized the code.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is there anything else folks wanted to chat over? I'm hoping in the coming weeks, I can demo off some of the cool stuff we've been doing, either in the tooling meeting or in the general salsa meeting. Some of the cool stuff we've been doing with Fresca and Guac for some of the salsa stuff, like where we actually have Fresca generating salsa attestations. Those salsa attestations automatically getting put into the knowledge graph and then can be used for policy. And there's some cool things there that we've and some of the stuff that I know we're going to want to do with, for example, with NPM is we'd love to be able to sort of have some way of maybe even subscribing, if we could, to like the NPM like feed to just sort of say, hey, pull me all packages that have been updated over the past day and pull down all their attestations, if they do have them, that sort of thing. There's some cool stuff on
that should be possible. So I could be wrong here, but I do think we are sort of letting anyone spin up a couch follower because we are storing it in CouchDB. So you should be able to follow
cool.
that couch database.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. That's cool. Cool. Yeah, that's definitely something we'd be interested in. And yeah, there's some cool. Yeah, the other thing from the Fresca side, we're looking at also doing like salsa policy stuff at build time as well, to sort of say, hey, like even though salsa itself is not transitive, we want to sort of say, but you could be transitive if you want to, right? Like we want to like make it so that you could go above and beyond and sort of enforce stuff like all the dependencies I pull in for my build must apply these salsa rules and these policy rules, and when generating the salsa provenance must also follow these rules. So if salsa provenance on, if you build something and it doesn't match some sort of salsa provenance rules at the end, it's like, sorry, you don't actually get to publish your package, that kind of thing. So hopefully you can demo that in a few weeks. But yeah, any other topics that anyone wanted to bring up?
I think I'm good.
Cool. So I'll see everybody next week, and have a good weekend, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Yep. Later. Bye.